She was treated like a servant. He was an alpha too broken to love again. The Alpha's Nanny. Chapter 1. They didn't call her by her name. They called her girl, or worse, when they remembered she existed at all. Sierra learned the map of the Shadowpine kitchens the way a wolf pup learns snow, nose first, eyes second. The smell of stew told her which ladle to choose, the sound of the old iron pump told her if a gasket would break by sunset. Work had its own grammar, and if she conjugated it perfectly she could be invisible all evening. Invisible was safer. Except to them. Two small bodies cannonied into her skirts exactly 4 minutes after dawn. You promised pancakes, whined Tavi, the older by 1.5 years with Brutus's dark eyes and a mind like a trap. Her sister, Kessa, simply leaned her cheek into Sierra's thigh, which was how she apologized and demanded an apple slice at the same time. I promised food, Sierra corrected, voice low enough that the head cook wouldn't hear kindness and assign more chores as tax. And look, food. She flipped the cakes with a wrist that had learned to be quick when the beta's mate liked to throw plates. A smear of butter, a sprinkle of cinnamon if no one looked. Kessa giggled at the steam as if it told jokes. They had lost their mother in winter, a clean death that came like ice in the marrow and left nothing for wolves to tear. The pack had lost its Luna. The pups had lost their stars. The Alpha had lost his map. The Alpha. Brutus Alden, born under a crimson moon and rumored to have torn a bear in half at 19, walked the long hall to the kitchen with the silence of first snow. Sierra always knew when he was near, not because of footsteps, he wasted nothing, but because the other bodies in a room changed temperature. They became small weather around an incoming storm. He stopped 2 paces from the stove. Sierra did not look up. A servant who looked an alpha in the eye invited notice, and notice was the first step to trouble. She slid 2 cakes onto a plate and placed it on the low table where the pups ate. Tavi's fork hovered, uncertain. Kessa put sticky fingers on Sierra's wrist and anchored her in place. Eat, Sierra murmured. Before a gust of wind steals them. Tavi's mouth twitched. The wind isn't allowed. From behind her, a voice like gravel rolled through honey. The wind will apply for permission first. Sierra went very still. The pan hissed. Her own wolf, quiet, kept, lifted its head. She turned. Alpha Brutus had eyes that looked made for night. Not cruel. Not gentle. Absolute, the way mountains are. He took in the pups, the plate, the way Sierra kept herself small as a word muttered rather than spoken. Something passed through his face like cloud shadow over stone. He nodded once, to the pancakes, to the caretaking, to the fact that the kitchen hadn't burned down in his grief, and said, "Thank you." No one in this house had thanked Sierra in a year. The word landed with weight. She bowed her head, which was how you say you heard without pretending you believed. Then the head cook clapped a pan and called her girl. She went back to invisible. Chapter 2. The pack moved around grief like a river around a boulder, divide, rejoin, act as if the rock were the only possible shape of the world. Brutus did his rounds with a precision that felt like a wound stitched too tight. Patrol rosters updated themselves under his hand. Boarders repelled rogues before rogues finished wanting to test them. The Shadowpine name grew quieter and more dangerous. It was after evening drills, when the warriors stank of sweat and iron, that Beta Lyle cornered Sierra by the wash barrels. He had the kind of smile that made faith rot. "Girl," he said, drawing the word out as if it were made of taffy and meant to be shared, the pups had become demanding. "Our Alpha won't see it. Children ruin kings." Sierra lifted a basket, not because it was heavy but because it was an excuse to move. "They're not demanding," she said, carefully neutral. "They are grieving, and the body tells it with appetite." Lyle's hand landed on the barrel rim, close enough that she smelled lavender oil on nails too clean for a soldier. "Careful. Opinions make slaves look like wives in the wrong light." She did not flinch. She did not challenge. She tucked her chin and slid sideways with the basket hugged to ribs that had learned to be sturdy. Later, in the understairs room where she kept her mattress, she braced her elbows on her knees and breathed until her wolf lay down again. A thump. A whisper. Sirah? Two small silhouettes in the doorway, Tavi clutching a wooden soldier with one leg glued back crooked, Kessa dragging a blanket like a comet's tail. Should be asleep, Sierra murmured, but she lay back and made a valley with her body for both of them to fall into. Kessa's braids tickled her collarbone. Tavi's toes were ice. Papa was loud, Tavi mumbled. He growled at the table. Everyone looked away. I didn't. Did he growl at you? No. At the empty. Sierra stared at the low ceiling. Empty roared louder than most men. Do you want a story about a fox with a limp who stole the king's bread? Kessa's breath stuttered into a laugh. Yes. Sierra told it, voice steady as bread rising. Halfway through, the air in the doorway changed. She didn't turn, that new wariness in the kitchen had taught her its cousin. She finished the fox's improbable triumph and kissed two small crowns. Brutus stood there, wider than the frame, carrying the kind of exhaustion that isn't about sleep. His gaze went to the bare boards, the thin blanket, the fact that his children weren't afraid of this narrow little space because it held them when the house above felt like teeth. I can have them carried back, he said. They'll wake, Sierra answered. And then you'll have to hear Kessa explain the philosophy of pancakes at midnight. Something like humor ghosted around his mouth. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, the scrape loud in the quiet. You tell good stories. Stories are bread. And meat? He asked, as if testing a bridge with a heel. Meat is work. His eyes warmed by a quarter degree. You're not wrong. Chapter 3. Shadowpine needed a Luna and did not know how to ask for one without making a wound out of the asking. Lyle started arranging dinners disguised as strategy meetings. Daughters of allied houses arrived with their hair braided to say, useful, and their wrists bared to say, breedable. They smiled at Brutus the way knives shine at meat. He endured as if paying a tax. Sierra cleaned floors afterwards that were sticky with spilled wine and envy. She knew the smell of ambition without calories. She also knew hunger that could snap a neck and call it problem-solving. The pack loved their alpha. The pack needed him to be more than a battlefield. In the laundry court one noon, when steam rose like surrendered ghosts, a she-wolf in crimson will set down her basket beside Sierra's and said in the tone of friendly murder, "You have the alpha's favor." Sierra did not look up from ringing. "I have his children's apples." The woman, Etta, cousin to Lyle's mate, laughed. "Same thing, at his age." Then, softer, "Little one, be careful." "I am not little. Compared to the knives in this place, we are all little." Sierra glanced then, just enough to catalog Etta's face for the "not an enemy today" shelf. "Why warn me?" "Because I had hands like yours once," Etta said, matter of fact. "And because boys who grew up rich like Lyle share toys poorly." That evening the pups dragged Sierra to the training ring bleachers. "Papa is sparring," Tavi announced, as if the moon itself had submitted an application. Brutus stripped his shirt and stepped into the dust. The noise that rose from the warriors could have fed a beast. Sierra had never watched him fight. No one made slaves attend beauty. It was not beautiful. It was inevitable. Brutus moved like a decision. His wolf hovered just under the skin, a shadow that made every feint feel like a promise. When he pinned a challenger, he did it without cruelty and with the totality of a closing door. "Papa is best," Kessa sighed, sticky with pride. Sierra did not disagree. But what snagged her breath wasn't dominance. It was the way Brutus put his opponent back on feet after, as if teaching the body how to remember itself mattered more than winning. He caught Sierra's gaze then, caught, held, as if shocked to find a bar of iron where everyone kept telling him there was broomstraw. The look lasted half a heartbeat. It was enough to make Lyle notice who was in the bleachers. Enough to shove the evening toward a cliff. Chapter 4. It began with a broken cup. They always do, in houses that pretend accidents are to blame. Sierra was folding napkins into the shapes Kessa liked. Wolves, failed wolves, owls if you squinted, when a ceramic snap cut through the kitchen noise. Lyle turned, lip curling like a blade finding skin. "Girl," he said, "you dropped that." Sierra's hands were flat on linen. "I didn't." "You did now," he purred, and knocked another cup with a flick of his fingers. It fell. Shattered. All eyes went to Sierra because that was how the game worked. If you looked at power too long, power wanted to eat you. She inhaled and counted warps in the floor plank under her shoe. "I'll get a broom." She bent. A hand caught her shoulder and held with the pressure of a mountain, remembering it could kneel. "You'll stand," Brutus said, voice not raised, all the wolves in it awake. He looked at Lyle as if measuring him for an absence. "My house does not frame the hands that feed my children." Lyle smiled a court smile. "We frame no one, Alpha. We maintain standards." "Then begin with yourself," Brutus said. "The standard is, do not harass the woman who keeps your Alpha from drowning in applesauce and grief." A ripple moved through the kitchen, shock, satisfaction, raw calculation. Sierra's pulse tripped. She hated that her gratitude felt loud. She hated that being defended made her visible. Brutus glanced down, as if catching her thought midair. "Sierra," he said, and speaking her name in a room that used girl like a leash, cut 3 invisible ropes at once. "Take Kessa and Tavi to the east porch when they're finished. There's sun. I'll bring the spoons." She nodded. She did not trust herself to speak. Lyle's eyes promised later. Edda's hand on Sierra's elbow promised escape routes. The head cook suddenly found a fascinating stain 3 inches to the left and said, "Yes, Alpha, to no one in particular." On the porch, Kessa slept with her head in Sierra's lap while Tavi quizzed Brutus on the ethical use of spoons in warfare. Brutus listened as if treaties depended on getting this exactly right. Sierra watched the way his mouth softened when he looked at his daughter's sleep. "Thank you," she said finally, low. His gaze flicked to her, heavy with attention that did not ask for anything back. "4 pancakes?" "4, standing," she said. When he pushed. Brutus's jaw worked. "I didn't stand earlier. I should have, months ago." He looked at the courtyard as if it might confess something if he stared long enough. "I am learning how to be Alpha without making everyone around me small first." She startled. Not many men in power admitted homework. "How's the lesson?" "Humbling." His mouth twitched. "Useful." Chapter 5. It did not take long for the pack to draw its own conclusions. Wolves track scent, then story. A rumor snuck through the sleeping furs. The Alpha's pups clung to a kitchen girl. The Alpha watched. The Beta fumed. A rival Luna candidate, smooth, silver, daughter of a northern house, arrived with pastries and a genuine laugh. Sierra kept 4 steps to the left of any conversation that sounded like future. In the nursery, worth didn't require a title. Worth meant Kessa's nightmares stopped when Sierra rubbed small circles between her shoulder blades and sang the alphabet like a spell. Worth meant Tavi asked hard questions and Sierra didn't flinch when the answers had claws. One night he watched from the doorway again. This time Sierra noticed him first. "She has the night terrors," she murmured. "They come like snow falling wrong." Brutus crouched, a man who understood how to reduce the size of his danger for children and never learned to do it for adults. "What helps?" "Warmth at the back," Sierra said. "And someone saying her name like we'd remember it even if the house burned down." His throat worked. He slid onto the floor behind Kessa and let Sierra guide his hand. "Kessa," he said softly, as if teaching a mountain how to say feather. The child's breath evened. Sierra's did not. She became molecule and attention, every sense tuned to the sound of a father learning his way back to a child's door. When Kessa slept easy, Sierra moved to stand. Brutus's hand found her wrist, not to hold but to steady, and the jolt that moved between skin and skin had nothing to do with sparks and everything to do with the way two wolves recognize a scent they have been denying. He released her as if the touch had burned. He didn't retreat. He made a space between them where truth could enter without stripping dignity on the way in. "Sierra," he said again, tasting the syllables. "If I were a decent man, I would ensure you were courted by someone safe." "You are a decent man," she said before cowardice could build a case. "And I am not a something." His mouth curved, slow. "Noted." He rose. The room tilted in a way that had nothing to do with balance. "Tomorrow," he said, "I will be gone at dawn for a border treaty. Lyle will accompany. I want precautions." "Keys," she said. "I'll keep the pups with me. Etta will help." He hesitated. The question in his eyes was older than either of them. "Are you afraid of me?" Sierra inhaled until her ribs found a new shape. "No, a beat. But I am afraid of men who think your shadow is theirs to wear. I won't let them." The promise sounded like an oath that tasted of iron and bone. Chapter 6. Dawn came mean and wet. Brutus rode east with 6 and left Lyle to rot in his own perfume. Sierra gathered provisions, apples, oatcakes, a bottle of the syrup Kessa swore kept bad dreams from finding her. She settled in the old library where the air smelled of leather and maps. Etta brought a basket and 3 knives. "For butter," she said blandly, laying one by the window latch. They lasted until noon before the house decided to test its hinges. Kessa toddled after a dust mote tilting like a star. Tavi traced old borders with a stub of charcoal. A floorboard whispered wrong. Sierra turned in time to see Lyle sidle through the library door with a bottle and a smile fitted like a glove over contempt. "Educational," he said. "Children must learn what rooms are for." "This one keeps stories," Sierra replied. "It doesn't need yours." Lyle's gaze slid to Kessa and warmed in a way that made Sierra's wolf rise, teeth already in the light. "Come now. I have served this house with devotion. Would you deny me a conversation with its future?" "You have served yourself," Etta said from the window, not turning. "And the future will bite if you put your hand near its mouth without permission." Lyle laughed. "Permission. From a kitchen he didn't finish, whore. He didn't get the chance." Sierra moved. "Not pretty. Effective." She stepped between Lyle and the children and planted her hand in the center of his chest with the authority of a woman who has stopped pots from boiling over and men from lying to themselves. "Out," she said. "Or stay and find out what butter knives do when they're bored." He tried to grab her wrist. "Bad math." Etta's knife kissed the side of his thumb. He hissed. Tavi stood, soldier gripped like a sword, lip trembling with rage he'd borrowed from adults. Kessa hid under a chair and whispered "Sierra, Sierra, Sierra" like prayer beans. Lyle's eyes went bright, feral. "You think the alpha will thank you for assaulting his second?" A new voice answered from the hall, quiet as snowfall sealing tracks. "He will." Brutus filled the doorway like the idea of safety. He had returned early, the treaty had signed quicker with less patience for fools. He took in the knives, the children, Lyle's cut, Sierra's stance. The air changed temperature. "Out," Brutus told Lyle, same word, different gravity. "Hand in the infirmary. Mouth in a river." Lyle opened his to argue. Brutus's wolf came to the windows of his eyes and looked out. Lyle swallowed. Left. Silence. Then Kessa launched from under the chair to Sierra's legs and wrapped them tight. Tavi's soldier clattered to the floor. Etta let out a breath she had folded in half for an hour. Brutus stepped closer, carefully. "Did he touch you?" "No," Sierra said, voice level by will. "He tried." Brutus's jaw flexed once, twice, the way a man who could tear bone remembers he also signs laws. "Thank you," he said, to Etta first, then to Sierra with a gravity that pressed her name into the room like a seal. "For keeping what is mine safe." Sierra met his eyes because she could not pretend small anymore. They're not things, Alpha. They are people. And I'm not yours. He inhaled like a man who has found the cliff he's been skirting in fog. You're right, he said. You are not mine. A beat. I would like you to be. Break time equals 0. 5s/. Chapter 7. The world did not stop. The hearth sputtered, a hound scratched, somewhere a plate considered leaping and didn't. Sierra's bones rang with a sound that had nothing to do with ears. Brutus stood there, hands empty and not threatening to be otherwise, eyes steady as if he had set down 50 pounds of pride a minute ago and found walking easier without it. Edda, who had lived long enough to recognize the edge of a story, gathered Tavi and Kessa like laundry and drifted toward the door. We will go practice the ethical uses of spoons, she announced. Tavi perked. Kessa clung. In the kitchen. Far away. When they were alone, Sierra laced and unlaced her fingers to keep from shaking. Brutus, she said, using his name like a bridge she was not sure could hold. If you are asking because I feed your children. I am asking because you feed me, he cut in, raw honesty burning the varnish off the moment. Not with soup. With the part of the world that doesn't make sense unless someone is kind to it. I am not good at asking. I learned power before I learned please. But I do not want a Luna by convenience. Sierra laughed once. It sounded newly born and already walking. I am no one. You are the axis my house has spun on for months, he said, not soft, not pleading, factual as weather. And I am tired of pretending gravity is optional. Her wolf uncurled, curious. Her human counted casualties. If you mark me, law will call it scandal. The allied houses will call it an insult. Your council will call it madness. They called keeping my children alive madness last winter, he said. They can call this love. He winced. I know that word sounds juvenile in a hall that eats politics for breakfast. I don't care. Sierra searched his face for the lie that would save her work. Found none. Found the opposite, a man whose grief had made him careful and whose longing had made him brave. Alpha, she whispered, and the title was a promise to meet him at the height of his responsibility, not hide behind it. If you mark me without asking my wolf, I will bite you. Relief cracked his mouth into something like joy. He stepped in, slow, telegraphing intent like a gentleman in a room full of knives. His hand came up, hovered at her nape, asking one last time without words. Sierra tipped her head in answer and felt heat surge between skin and skin like a river finding its bed. Teeth. Not brutal. Binding. His mark set just below the curve of her ear, not to cage, a seal. Her wolf rose to meet it, not conquered, equal, and the room inhaled as if a storm had passed and left the house newer. Outside, someone dropped a spoon and laughed as if accidentally starting a tradition. Inside, Sierra's name belonged to her and to the man who had finally learned how to say it without taking anything away. Chapter 8. The pack exploded, as packs do when surprised by love that refuses to ask permission from tradition. Some howled in approval, real wolves waking at the edge of ceremony. Some hissed in corners. Lyle did not appear for 3 days. Rumor put him everywhere but useful. Brutus called a gathering in the long hall. He did not dress it in satin or threaten to bite anyone who frowned. He stood with Sierra at his right and spoke to the pack the way a father speaks to a table, practical, direct, affectionate without performance. I chose my Luna, he said. Not because allied houses required a treaty. Because my children required a home. Because I did. She has been making one in this kitchen while we were busy pretending kingdoms are built in war tents. He looked at Sierra then, not for theater. For steadiness. If you bow, bow because you respect the work. If you cannot, work harder. A hush. Then Edda began to clap, slow and dangerous. It spread. Not thunder. Rain on a roof that doesn't leak anymore. The head cook cried quietly and pretended it was steam. Tavi hooped. Kessa bit Sierra's wrist gently and declared, "Mine," to the hall, in case semantics were difficult. Not everyone joined. A man from the tannery rolled his eyes and left. Two she-wolves whispered with the speed of knives. This was living, not victory. Sierra lifted her chin and let their dislike wash over a body that had learned to convert scorn into flour. That night, when the house exhaled and wolves slept like they trusted the floor, Brutus brought Sierra to the old Luna's rooms. He carried nothing and everything, a fear he might be asking her to live in a ghost, a prayer he was not. "Do you want to change it?" he asked, honestly terrified. Sierra walked the space, faded tapestries of the moon in her phases, a balcony where frost argued with stars, a cradle stored in a corner as if the house weren't sure what to do with memory. She touched the mantle. Her palm came away dusty and determined. "We keep the balcony," she said. "We change everything else. Tomorrow I want paint. And a table in here big enough for 10. A Luna is not a saint on a shelf." Brutus exhaled. Relief made him boyish for a heartbeat, something he would never show another soul. "Yes, Luna." She turned. He had moved close without moving at all. The room shifted to make space for the fact that the Alpha and his chosen were learning how to be humans together and wolves together and kings of a house that preferred bread to hunger. "Brutus," she said, stepping into his gravity because some stars are worth orbiting, "kiss me like we're bad at politics." He did, and the house did not fall down. It rebuilt itself around them, one nail of truth at a time. Chapter 9. Council smelled like tallow and old pride. They gathered in the stone chamber with its antler chandelier and the map carved into the table, a river of scratches where men had enjoyed pretending lines mattered more than people. Brutus sat at the head, Sierra at his right. She wore linen the color of clean wheat and a knife at her belt that said butter and otherwise. Beta Lyle arrived late with a bandage on his hand and a face arranged for piety. Two allied captains leaned back to make room for his performance. A silver-haired she-wolf from the north, the pastry-bearing candidate, took the far chair and smiled as if she'd never meant harm in her life. "Shadowpine has always married strength," Lal began, voice smooth enough to oil a hinge that didn't need it. "We honor the Alpha's impulse. But a Luna must be bred to rule." His gaze flicked to Sierra. "Not baked." Brutus's fingers drummed once on the carved river. The warriors watched the knuckles as men watch weather. "Our last Luna ruled by feeding her people and making me laugh when treaties made me want to break my own jaw. I consider that pedigree." Sierra reached for the map with her forefinger and traced a path between two villages that had not liked each other since a goat incident 3 generations ago. "If rulership means knowing how to keep this road passable in thaw," she said, "I'm qualified." A rumble, half amusement, half appreciation. The silver-haired candidate, Ray, tilted her head. "Let us test the word qualified," she offered, voice bright as clean steel. "Right of hearth." Edda hissed softly. Lyle smiled like a trap snapping shut. The right of hearth was older than blood feuds, a challenge to a Luna's claim, tried not by claws but by home. The challenger sets a task every house requires and no army can fake: feed a hall in famine style, calm a child who isn't yours, quiet a fight without drawing blood, keep a fire when the wood is wet. Fail one, yield the ring. Brutus's eyes went winter still. "Do you challenge my Luna?" Ray lifted empty palms. "I challenge the word. If she bears it, none will dare whisper after." Sierra exhaled through her nose. Her pulse did not spike, it steadied. She had been doing these tasks invisible for years. "Name the hour." "Dawn," Ray said. "We begin with wet wood." "Of course," Sierra murmured, smiling without teeth. "You brought the rain with you." Chapter 10. Dawn turned the courtyard into wet vellum. Ray's attendants dumped a cart of green logs by the hearth while the hall gathered with the eager cruelty of people who want spectacle and will call it tradition. Sierra rolled her sleeves, looked at the wood, and didn't argue with physics. Split thinner, she told Tavi, who marched over with a solemnity that made men grin. You, she pointed at a warrior who'd survived 3 border wars, bring me the ugliest, driest basket of twigs you can find in the loft. Edda, fat. From the bacon? Edda asked, already moving. From the bacon. Ray watched, polite as a knife rack. Rules allow counsel? Rules allow results, Sierra said, meeting her gaze. Shadowpine runs on we. She built the fire like a treaty, small truths first, larger ones later. Twigs, then splits. Bacon fat rubbed on the underside where flame would kiss. 2 breaths, a spark, then patience, which is where most men fail. She did not blow like a panicked god. She fed like a woman who'd kept babies alive at 3 a.m. The green logs wept and then, shamed by smaller wood's competence, caught. The hall exhaled heat as if it had been invited back into its own body. Ray inclined her head, impressed despite herself. Second trial, a child who is not yours. She gestured, and a boy of 6 was escorted in, wolf-bright eyes, fists like knots, a cut across the brow that had not been admired gently. He bites. So do I, Sierra said mildly. She crouched until they were breath close and let her wolf ride gentle under her skin. Name? Bren, he muttered, choosing defiance rather than silence. Bren, this hall is loud. Your body wants to be louder. I have a job for you. She held out a wooden spoon. You will stir the porridge until your arm argues with your head. When your head wins, I'll feed you first and teach you how to teach your arm next time. No cooing. No bribes. Work that made sense. Bren's jaw worked, he took the spoon like a sword. The cook hid a smile and moved aside. 3 minutes later, Bren's breath evened. 5 minutes later, he was telling another boy the ethics of stirring. Ray's mouth tightened. Third, a fight. Without blood. Lyle obliged by insulting a tannery foreman's mother with an artistry that deserved fines. The foreman swung. Sierra stepped between with a cloth dipped in the bacon fat bucket and slapped both men's forearms with grease. They froze, startled. The hall laughed. The spell broke. You cannot honor your dead if you arrive at their table stinking of pig, Sierra said briskly, thrusting rags into their hands. Clean yourselves and say her name without lying. They did. Applause rolled like a storm that had decided to bless, not break. Ray lifted her palms, acknowledging. Last trial, famine style. Feed us on scraps. Sierra's grin went feral. Shadowpine, she called, bring your stales. Within minutes, crusts, bones, peelings, a jar of beans older than Tavi's front teeth. She built a stew that smelled like the memory of plenty, bread fried into crumbs for topping, bones roasted to confess their remaining goodness, peelings crisped into chips that fooled children into thinking they were wicked. She served Ray first. The northerner tasted, blinked once, and then ate like a woman who had been fed performance for months and forgot what food was for. She set down her spoon. Bowed. Luna, she said simply, loud enough for every corner. The hall howled. Even the walls felt taller. Chapter 11. Victory had a cost. Lal paid it by sulking into treachery. By dusk, a horn sounded from the west ridge, the 2-note call that meant rogues. Brutus rose with the economy of a blade leaving a sheath. Numbers? 7, male the sentry called. No colors. Hunger smell. Hunger smell meant winter wolves who'd eaten their elders and learned only speed. Brutus snapped orders, left flank with Jonas, Edda to the pups, Ray to the infirmary because competence is a currency you spend more than once. Sierra moved without being told, children to the cellar where the barrels whispered cool songs, bread in baskets, knives laid where hands could find them if hands needed to. Lyle appeared at the cellar door with that same smile he wore the day of pancakes. Alpha wants you above, he lied. Sierra evaluated the lie the way she evaluated flour, by feel. No, he doesn't, she said, and shut the door in his face. She bolted it. Turned to the circle of small faces bright with fear. Who knows the spoon song? Kessa raised a hand. Tavi rolled his eyes and sang anyway. The cellar filled with clatter and rhythm. Fear snarled and then had to keep time. Above, the thud of bodies, the scrape of claws. Brutus's voice once, low and terrible, hold. A shadow leaked under the door, slick as night with bad manners. Ben, Sierra thought first, and her wolf leaned toward the dark with relief. Then the shadow smiled, too thin, too wide. Not Ben. A rogue spill, the kind that follows blood downhill. It reached for Kessa's bare ankle. Sierra moved like a storm arriving early. She threw salt, not at the thing, but around Kessa's foot in a circle that hissed when darkness touched it. The shadow jerked back, offended. Sierra planted her palm on the wood and said the cellar's true name, the one the first Luna had sung when barrels were rolled in and promises poured. The door thickened. The shadow thinned. Above, the howls turned. From eager to injured to answering. Ben flooded the cracks between floorboards, familiar now, warmth without mercy. He slid under the door like the feeling when someone loyal arrives. The rogue spill tried to run, Ben ate it like a law. Luna, he said, voice in the wood, checking. Present, Sierra answered, breath shaking only now. Children laughed nervously. Tavi hooped. Kessa sat on Sierra's feet and declared, not allowed. Correct, Ben said gravely. Not allowed. Minutes later, the horn sounded again, 3 slow notes. Safe. Sierra unbolted the door and climbed into a hall that smelled of copper and victory and exhaustion. Brutus stood in the threshold, shirt ripped, a cut on his cheek closing as she watched. His eyes found hers like a man remembers where the river is. Report, he said, because work comes before relief. Basement held. We salted, we sang. A spill tried the line. Ben. Ben? Tavi piped up behind her. The ceiling? The ceiling, Ben confirmed from the beams, smug. Brutus's mouth twitched. He stepped closer, touched Sierra's temple with the back of his fingers, a courtly gesture that made her knees consider alternatives. Good. Perfect. Later I will ask how you knew the cellar's name. My mother taught me to ask rooms what they want to be, she said. This one wants to keep. So do I, he murmured. Chapter 12. Keeping meant consequences. They burned the rogues and salted the ash. They bound the wounded and fed the living. Ray stitched Brutus's cheek while pretending not to enjoy the intimacy of competent work. Edda calculated losses and found fewer than fear had wagered. Lyle arrived with a sling and a tale of personal heroism so lurid even his reflection rolled its eyes. Brutus called him into the courtyard at noon where lies have less room. You opened the cellar door, he stated. Lyle spread wounded hands. I sought our Luna's safety. You sought leverage, Brutus corrected, all warmth gone. You put my children at risk. You mark a servant and expect loyalty? Lyle snapped, mask slipping. You made this house ridiculous. Brutus's wolf stepped closer to the surface with the relish of a hound who finally gets the rabbit in an open field. I made it honest, he said. And safe. You prefer fear because it makes you necessary. He glanced to the watching warriors. Beta Lyle, by my mark in the council's law, you are stripped of rank. You will work the tannery for a season. If you speak to my Luna or my children without my explicit invitation, I will remove your tongue and hang it over the east gate as a warning to other mouths that confuse clever with useful. Silence gathered like witnesses. Lyle's face went the color of old paper. You would demote me for her? Brutus did not look at Sierra when he answered, love that needs an audience starves too easily. For us, he said. For the pack you forgot exists beyond your reflection. They sent Lyle away under guard, not as humiliation but as policy. Men who believe themselves wronged by love often become poems no one wants to hear. Sierra's shoulders dropped a fraction. The house breathed. That night, with the pups sticky from honey and safety, Brutus found Sierra on the balcony with paint under her nails. The Luna's rooms no longer looked like a shrine. The tapestries had gone, a long table had arrived, herbs hung from a beam, the cradle had been reclaimed as a toy box without apology. "I should give you a coronation," he said, settling beside her. "You gave me keys," she answered. "Better." His hand found the mark he'd set, thumb circling as if making the vow again. Heat uncoiled between them, honest as hunger with a plate. He waited, God, he waited, the patience of a man proud to be taught. Sierra turned into him and kissed without politics, without agenda, without fear. Consent hummed under everything like a well-tuned floor. They learned each other slow, the way wolves learn a new forest, careful, delighted, thorough. Later, breath braided, he said into her hair, "I was afraid of wanting after she died." "I was afraid wanting made me a thief," Sierra replied. "And now?" "Now I want what feeds," she said. "You do, too." His laugh was quiet and full. "Yes," he said. "Gods help us, yes." Chapter 13. Winter locked the roads with the satisfaction of a task completed. Trade slowed to a stubborn crawl, news arrived with frost in its beard. Shadowpine learned the art of the long season, reheating jokes, teaching children to sew scars into stories, making sure no one slipped into silence that lasted too long. Sierra built the open table. Every seventh night, the Luna's hall served stew and bread to anyone with hands. No questions about rank. No assigning of shame. Ray taught knife skills to a boy who'd been stealing carrots. Edda thumped mugs in front of two women who had once wanted Brutus's ring and now wanted warmth more. Ben hung in the rafters like weather that chose to be kind and snarled softly any time a voice tried to turn cruel. On the 9th open table, a scout arrived blown thin by cold. "Ridgevale," he panted. "Alpha Garan. He sends a message." He held up a strip of leather burned with a mark, "Parley, or I take what you guard." Everyone looked at the balcony where Kessa had dropped a wooden wolf and was frowning at the ethics of gravity. Everyone looked at Sierra's mark. Everyone looked at Brutus. He stood. "We parley," he said. "Tomorrow at noon. On the black sward." After, in the quiet that follows loudly made plans, Sierra set her hand on Brutus's chest where his heart hit like a soldier on the training yard. "Trap. Maybe," he said. "Or a test." He kissed her forehead as if to armor it. "I go with 10. You stay with the house." "No," she said gently. "I stay with the pack." He smiled, pained. "Same thing." Chapter 14. The black sward was a scar on the world where grass forgot to be soft. Snow lay in thin sheets, wind tried names and discarded them. Garan arrived all shoulders and teeth, his wolves fan behind him like the wrong kind of prayer. He looked at Sierra first, because men like him always do, measure the woman, calculate the leverage. He smiled with hunger and politics. "You've marked the help," he said to Brutus. "Admirable thrift. Does she fetch?" Ben's growl vibrated in the bones of the frozen ground. Brutus didn't move. "She keeps," he said. "Fetch is for men who've never built a house." Garen's eyes narrowed. "Shadowpine grows soft. Your beta is a tanner. Your Luna is a cook. Your warriors sing with children. And eat," Brutus said. "And sleep. And love. It makes them hard to kill." Garan snorted. "Borders thin. I claim the stretch by the black spruce. Old treaty. Older teeth. Old lies," Brutus returned calmly. "The spruce stands because our last Luna watered it the summer your men tried to burn our ridge." Garen's gaze slid again to Sierra, looking for a flinch. She didn't give him one. She stepped forward until Scent met Scent and extended a wrapped parcel. Bread, she said. Eat it or don't. But don't lie with your mouth full. Surprise cracked his mask. He took it despite himself. Cold men always accept heat disguised as food. He bit. Chewed. Swallowed. You think this makes me merciful? No, Sierra said. I think it makes you human for the space of a loaf. She lifted her chin. While you are human, hear this, you set foot past the spruce again, and our house will feed on your hunger until it learns manners. Garan laughed, sharp. Your kitchen threatens me. My kitchen ends winters, Brutus said. He stepped closer, voice lowering to the register where Wolf stopped pretending not to listen. Bring your grievance to council in thaw. Or bring your dead. Either way, do not bring yourself past the spruce today. Wind decided to change sides. Garan felt it. He spat, wrapped what remained of the bread because even bastards respect a good crust, and jerked his chin. Thaw, he said. Then we see which kind of keeping wins. They left. Brutus's shoulders eased by ounces. Sierra exhaled a laugh she hadn't realized she'd been rehearsing. You have fetched very well, she murmured, and he grinned, the kind that promises long summers if men behave. On the ride home, Ben slid along the snow's underskin, pleased. You threatened to feed an enemy, he told Sierra, almost proud. I offered him a chance to feed himself, she corrected. Different spell. Marry me again, Brutus said, shameless and warm. In spring, Sierra replied. On the grass we kept. He nodded. We'll invite the wind. It already RSVP'd, Ben said, and the forest laughed. Chapter 15. Spring was a rumor told by mud. Snow resigned in strips, eaves argued with water, wolves forgot to scowl between noon and 3. Sierra's open table moved outside, where benches remembered they were made for laughter. Children thumped sticks against tree roots and called it drumming. Brutus mended a gate with the careful showiness of a man who knows children are watching. Then Thaw did what Thaw always does, it pulled old trouble out of the ground. Ridgevale scouts were seen near the black spruce in pairs that pretended not to be threes. Garan sent token gifts, a smoked hindquarter, a bottle of something that called itself whiskey and tasted of impatience. He did not come. Men who posture in winter sometimes stall in spring. The world begins to smell like decisions. Council met under open rafters. Ray spoke first. The border will not hold by speeches, she said. Nor by arrows alone. We must show we know which hill is ours, and why. Why, Sierra echoed. Not just because a dead man once said so. Because our people sleep safer if that line stays. Because our wells don't turn jealous if their shadow is ours. Brutus tapped the carved river with a knuckle, new scars silvering his cheek into a map of bad nights survived. I'll meet Garan at the spruce at noon 2 days hence. Hunters on high ground. No first arrow unless they step past Loam. He looked to Sierra. Hearth ready if we drag men home bleeding. Hearth ready if you drag men home embarrassed, she returned. Shame needs soup faster than wounds do. After council, they walked the line together, Sierra, Brutus, Ben, a dark echo sliding with the patience of a creek. The spruce stood black as an oath. Beneath it, fox tracks, the neat reed of a doe, wolf pads that did not belong to Shadowpine. Brutus crouched, fingertip in loam. 3. One lame in the left hind. Garan trains his arrogant to scout. Sierra set her palm on rough bark. This tree wants to stand where it was promised. Keep your men where you can see them, and I'll keep your home the way I can feel it. Ben rose as if smoke chose a shape. If Garan brings hunger, I'll eat the parts that eat back. Leave him enough to learn, Sierra said. I'd rather a reformed neighbor than a heroic funeral. Brutus's mouth curved, the expression a man wears when handed a future he didn't dare order, already plated and hot. You aim soft, he said. I aim durable, she corrected. Chapter 16. Garan came late, which is a way some men think they control time. He had 10, Brutus had 10. The spruce, indifferent, set its shadow where it pleased. Garan looked bigger in thaw, winter fur gone, sinews showing the cost. Parley, he said, with the confidence of someone who liked how that word put a leash on knives. Parley, Brutus agreed. Ben pooled in the shade, large as a rule. Garan swung his gaze to Sierra. You keep bringing the kitchen. Because you keep mistaking it for weakness, she said. She held up a leather pouch. Seeds. Barley that bends. Beans that climb when poles give up. I will trade for your stubbornest field. He laughed. I came for land, and the Luna offers salads. Food, she said evenly. The kind that keeps men from becoming problems. Trade or bleed, you choose which kind of story your pups inherit. His eyes flinched at Pups, the smallest twitch, and Sierra filed it, a tenderness he forgot to armor. Then he wheeled sly. A trial, then. Your kitchen against my hall. If yours feeds men after a fight better than mine does, I sign the border until harvest. If mine beats yours, I take a finger of spruce shadow to pasture. Ray murmured, it's law in the north. Hall versus Hall, the civility duel. Brutus's jaw worked. Food is not a weapon. It is exactly that, Garan said, without shame. Ask your winter. Sierra's wolf considered. Her human nodded. We accept. Tomorrow at noon. We cook where the spruce can witness. You bring your bruised. I bring mine. We feed them and count the fists that stop wanting to bite. Garan grinned, all bone. Good. I love a feast that picks a side. When Shadowpine turned homeward, Brutus hissed, you volunteered our bellies. I volunteered our mercy, Sierra said. If we win, men go quiet for a season. If we lose, we still fed them before they broke more of each other. Ben's voice came warm from the spruce's shade. She plays my game better than I do. You play different halves, Brutus muttered, already planning wood, water, kettles, the placement of benches like infantry. We cook as if this decides winter. It always does, Sierra said. Chapter 17. They built field kitchen like a siege done kindly. Ray directed spits, Edda marshaled knives, Merrick requisitioned kettles big enough to baptize a horse. Sierra claimed a long flat stone as altar and laid out herbs like a language she'd invented. Brutus wrestled a cauldron into position and stood back for orders he pretended not to enjoy receiving. Ben soaked himself into the ground so sparks went where they should. Garen's hall arrived with spectacle, bright banners, cooks in black with sleeves rolled to show scars polished into brag. They hung iron chains and lowered grates and poured oil fans that licked flame into applause. His people whistled. Shadowpine did not. They got to work. Sierra began with broth, bones roasted till they confessed, onions sweated slow, a carrot, a parsnip, the heel of a cheese that remembered summer. Into that she folded barley from South Hollow, beans that climbed, scraps of meat rinsed of pride, bitter greens to teach tongues maturity. She salted like a woman making promises she meant to keep. Brutus touched every station without hovering, his presence steadied hands, and men who thought they fought better than they boiled learned otherwise. Ray flipped flatbread on hot stone, fingers too fast for envy. Edda cut apples with the affection of someone who knows dessert can stop a war. Garen's cook seared meat to thunder. Their spices swaggered. Their knives sang. Men cheered. Sierra did not compete with noise. She stirred at intervals like good conversation, letting heat say what it had learned, interrupting when it lied. She taught Tavi to scatter herb salt from high so it fell like weather. Kessa dipped a spoon and announced, "It tastes like safe." The hall recorded the phrase as if it were canon. At noon both sides served. Garen's bowls were drama, smoke, char, red meat that reminded men of the rush. Shadowpine's were patience and recovery, something your grandmother would feed you after you'd done a stupid brave thing and survived. The judges were the bruised, 10 from each pack, hungry enough to be honest. They ate. Silence did not fall, it thickened with thought. A Ridgevale fighter with a black eye set down Garen's bowl and sighed. It makes me want to punch the next man. He lifted Sierra's. This makes me want to sit by a door and keep watch. Another, this one says I'm strong. He gestured to Garen's. Then to Sierra's, this one says I can afford not to prove it right now. Garen's jaw tightened. He knew truth when it cut him. He stood, spat to one side to keep from swallowing pride, and thrust out a forearm. Border holds to harvest, he growled. Damn your soup. Sierra clinked bowls with him and smiled like a catastrophe averted. Bring your wife when the beans climb, she added lightly. His flinch at wife was smaller this time. Progress is the art of measuring stutters. Brutus's hand found the small of her back in the public way that says my house knows who keeps it. Ben stretched in the dirt like a satisfied cat. The spruce shed a cone exactly between the lines as if stamping the parchment. Chapter 18. Shadowpine learned to walk easier and not softer. Border duties acquired an addendum. Taste the Luna's broth if you're biting your tongue too much. The tannery produced leather hinges for cellar doors. The schoolroom produced children who could salt a threshold and recite the ethics of stirring. Lal worked until his hands remembered they were part of a body that served. He did not look up when Sierra passed, which meant shame had finally picked a chair. Progress again. At home, heat became a language refined beyond emergencies. Consent wasn't ceremony, it was constant. Sometimes Brutus came to her mouth like he came to a battlefield, only after scouting the ground for traps and informing her he intended to win ethically. Sometimes Sierra came to him like a storm that had read the weather and decided to happen anyway. Sometimes they lay back to back and learned to sleep. Ben kept windows from fogging too completely because he liked watching without intruding and also because he was, at heart, weather. On a dawn muted by mist, the pups barged into the Luna's hall and canonied into a stack of folded linens. Ma, Kessa sang, having decided semantics are boring. Tavi announced, Ray says I can hold a bow if I don't point it at bread. Correct, Brutus said, deadpan. Bread is a non-combatant. He caught Sierra's eye and smiled like a man surprised daily by domesticity and delighted to let surprise become ritual. Ray entered with a leather roll. Treaty parchment from Ridgevale, she reported. Proper seal. Garan has handwriting like he bites quills. Sierra broke the wax. Inside, terse terms, sober promises, one line tacked on at the bottom as if a man had allowed his heart to borrow his hand. Send recipe. She laughed. We won his stomach. Stomachs keep swords sheathed, Brutus said. And marriages less stupid. Speaking of, Edda slid in, hair a riot, grinned sharp. 2 allied houses arrived with congratulations late and daughters earlier. They'd like to amend fences, which is to say measure your table. Let them, Sierra said, not threatened. Give them knives and onions. The ones who cry from the onions instead of the insult may stay for stew. Chapter 19. Summer remade the forest in loud green. The open table moved under trees, and Ben scattered shade so babies slept through laughter. Garan sent a messenger with beans that had climbed past his tallest pole and a grudging thanks. Lyle asked to speak to Brutus and did so in the tannery yard, where excuses smell worse than truth. I was wrong, he said, voice stripped. I made myself necessary by setting fires. I want to carry water. Brutus watched him long enough for silence to measure sincerity. Carry it, he said. A season more. If you don't spill it on purpose, we talk. Lyle nodded, jaw tight. He did not say thank you because he was not ready for words. He took 2 buckets and walked the row. At dusk Sierra found Brutus on the training green teaching Tavi how to lose. The boy lunged with wooden sword, Brutus took the blow and exaggerated his stagger. Kessa clapped so hard she fell over. Sierra leaned in the doorway, chest a full thing where once it had been hollowed by duty. "You're happy," Brutus observed, catching her scent even while faking injury. "Dangerously," she said. "We should invite Calamity to dinner so it doesn't feel ignored." As if summoned, a horn sounded from the north. Not panic, not war, childbirth. The infirmary needed hands. Sierra ran. Ray already had her sleeves rolled. Ben cooled the air. Brutus took Tavi and Kessa to the river to keep them from worrying the walls. Hours later, a new voice scolded the world for brightness. The mother, a tannery girl too young to have done any of this alone, wept because no one tells you joy staggers you like grief. Sierra placed the baby in her arms and said the line she'd learned to trust: "You did the work. The rest of us pretended the world would have ended if we weren't present." The girl laughed and snorted tears. "Luna," she said, awe and irreverence both. "He needs a name that doesn't make him bite people for fun." "Name him something that tastes good when said with your mouth full," Sierra replied. "Then he'll be fed even when you're too tired to cook." They named him Rye. Chapter 20. Autumn sharpened knives and mines. Garan kept his line. Rumor said he'd stopped breaking cups when angry and had once, kissed his wife's palm in public without biting the gesture in half. The valley measured harvest against the last 3, found this one fat with enough, and did not boast because gods hate that. The longest day of the year arrived inverted as ceremony: summer oath, renew bonds, mend grudges, count goats, pay taxes in laughter and onions. Sierra stood at the long table and watched her house be itself, warriors soft in corners, elders telling the same story with new pauses, children inventing games that taught ethics by accident. Brutus moved in it like a river through its right bed. Ben hung like dusk and occasionally plucked a joke out of the air when it might have bruised. When moon scraped itself bright against the roofline, Brutus climbed a bench and lifted a mug. "I have speeches," he warned, and groans rose like a rehearsed chorus. He smiled anyway. "Short ones. We kept our dead from breeding into gods. We fed our living until they stopped wanting to test their teeth on their neighbors. We made a border out of soup. Garan writes me letters with fewer insults. Ray's knife school has graduates who can peel an apple without bleeding. Lyle has not burned down his apology yet. Edda is terrifying. Ben is weather. And Sierra," he swallowed, pride and awe at war and not bothering to hide it, "Sierra keeps." He turned to her in front of everyone with the intimacy of a man whose private gratitude has earned the right to be public. "Marry me again," he said softly, words for her and the hall both. "Here. With bread. With spoons. With the spruce and the wind and our ridiculous, relentless pack." Sierra stepped up, took his mug, drank, and kissed him with a house load of witnesses who already knew. "Yes," she said. "Again. As often as this place needs." The howl that followed wrote itself into the beams. The bells, cracked and recast, rang clean. The wind RSVP'd without asking for a chair. Epilogue: How to keep a house from eating you. Years scrolled. Babies became spoon teachers. Lyle served, then stood, then learned to be quiet when praised. Garan sent seeds before Sierra asked, and, once, his eldest daughter with a braid like a treaty, she stayed a season and left with 4 recipes and a vow not to marry men who confuse threats with love. Shadowpine exported a peculiar strength. Not steel. Not furs. Practice. Villages learned the spoon song and the seller's name. Merchants salted their carts when rumors got loud. Hunters came home when rage would have pushed them past safe. The under still tested doors. Ben kept the habit of polite hunger and developed a fondness for watching pies cool. When strangers asked what changed, the valley told the story crooked and right. "Our alpha fell in love with a woman who made soup," they said, laughing because that is not how ballads prefer to arrange cause and effect. He marked her, and then he learned to ask before he touched. She fed his wolves without starving his men. Together they taught our house to say yes to the living fast enough that we forgot how to worship no. On a frost-etched morning, long after anyone bothered counting the years since pancakes, Sierra stood at the spruce with a basket of seeds. Brutus's arm wrapped her waist. The pups, less pup, more lanky, argued about which hill ran faster. Ben lay along the shadow like rest-given shape. Will it hold? Brutus asked, same question every season, same smile tucked in the corner for luck. Not on its own, Sierra said, same answer, same warmth. We keep it. With soup, with salt, with stories told before knives. With names said like we'll remember them after a fire. He kissed the mark he'd made, and she retied the ribbon at his wrist because even kings forget their cuffs. The spruce shed one cone, and the wind moved it to the border's exact laugh. Somewhere a child banged a spoon and did not apologize. Shadowpine stayed fed. The house didn't eat them. The wolves learned to nap in sunbeams without dreaming of war. And when winter came, it found doors that knew which way to swing. The end. Thank you so much for listening.